Hello students, in this video we are going to study the virtual machine. Okay, so how we are going to define the virtual machine. So what is the idea behind here the virtual machine? The idea behind a virtual machine is that it is we are going to abstract the hardware of a single computer. So the hardware of a single computer means what? It may be a CPU, memory, a disk drives, or even you may call a network interface cards, and so on. So we are going to abstract all these hardware components into a several different execution environments. Okay, so we are going to abstract the hardware of a single computer like CPU, memory, disk drives, etc. into a several different execution environments. So by creating the illusion that each separate execution environment is running at its own private computer. Okay, we are so how we are to define this virtual machine. Virtual machine means it is to abstract the all the hardware components into a several different execution environments, so thereby creating the illusion that each separate execution environment is going to act as its own private computer. Okay, so this is the diagram of virtual machine and the non-virtual machine. So in non-virtual machine, as you can see here, there is a normal hardware is there, and then that is in between the hardware and the processes. In OS only, as we have studied, the kernel is there. So kernel and processes. So kernel is going to interface between the hardware components and our execution parts. So similarly in the virtual machine, so according to the definition what I said here, we are going to abstract the hardware of a single computer into a several different execution environments, and each separate execution environment is going to act as its own private computer. Okay, so here, as like non-virtual machine, even in virtual machine we are going to have the hardware software in the upper layer. We are having the virtual machine manager. So we have divided. So I told in the definition that we are going to have the several different execution environments. So to know, for this virtual machine, the hardware is there. So in a single computer we have installed the one OS. So in that we have installed the virtual machine. Then virtual machine is going to act as the several different execution environments. So here in this example or in this diagram, we are having the three virtual machine, that is VM1, VM2 and VM3. So each virtual machine is going to act as its own computer. Means this B diagram is a single computer. In this single computer we have installed our virtual machine. So for example, in this virtual machine we have installed the three virtual machines. So each virtual machine is going to execute its own environment, or it is going to act as its own computer. Okay, so again in each virtual machine we are having the separate kernels here, as like your non-virtual machine. Clear? So do you remember I told in the beginning that in OS we are going to study, we have already studied the user mode and the kernel mode. So similarly in virtual machine also it is necessary to execute all the processes. It has to it is going to have the similar modes, that is kernel mode and the user mode. Just you remember that in virtual machine, the virtual machine is nothing but a one physical machine. Okay, one computer is there. So in that we have installed our virtual machine software. So after installing that virtual machine software, it is going to act as the different execution environment. So in this diagram we are having the three execution different environments. Okay, so each execution environment is going to act as its own private computer. Clear? So here, for example, just for understanding purpose, in one computer, in actual computer we have installed the Windows 7, you say. Okay, so in Windows 7 if I install the virtual machine, So if there are 3 virtual machines like VM1, VM2, VM3, in VM1 I can install the Ubuntu, and similarly in VM2 I can install the distributed operating system, and similarly some other operating system in the VM3 you can say. And each each VM or each virtual machine is having the separate kernels here, as you can see in the diagram. Okay, so as I told, each operating system is going to have the modes, that is a user mode and the kernel mode. Similarly, the original physical computer or the original virtual machine software is runs under the kernel mode. That is, I have in this diagram, virtual machine manager is itself a software here. Virtual machine software is itself a you can say a virtual machine manager is nothing but the software. So this virtual machine software or manager runs in the kernel mode. Remember, virtual machine manager runs in the kernel mode, and virtual machine like virtual VM1 is there, VM2 is there, VM3. So these VM1, VM2, VM3 are runs in the user mode. Clear? The virtual machine manager runs in the kernel mode, and VM1, VM2, VM3 are going to run in the user mode. Okay. So now, just as the physical machine, virtual machine is going to also has the user mode and the kernel mode. Okay. So we must have the virtual machine user mode and the virtual machine kernel mode. Means what here? So in this diagram, just look at this diagram B, virtual machine. Leave this hardware and virtual machine manager. So I told that virtual machine manager, this is one physical computer. This whole one rectangle is there, no, that is one physical machine, means computer. So this is so whenever we are going to run certain processes, it has to run under two modes, that is user and kernel mode. So this virtual machine manager is going to run in the kernel mode, and VM1, VM2, VM3 are run in the user mode. So similarly, so according to the definition, now VM1 is one different execution environment, similarly VM2 and VM3. So now VM1 execution environment is separately going to have the two modes, that is user mode and kernel mode. Similarly, VM2 is also having the separate user mode and kernel mode, and similarly VM3. Okay, so virtual machine is VM1, VM3 is having the different virtual machine user modes and the kernel mode. So both of which run in a physical user mode. Both of, not both here, all these VM3 are going to, VM1, VM2, VM3 are going to run in the user mode. Clear? So already I have written here. So in this slide, I told that implementation this. So how we are going to implement this? By using the user mode and the kernel mode. So just I have explained this. So what is the example of virtual machine here? JVM, that is Java Virtual Machine. So in depth you are going to study this Java Virtual Machine in the in Java. Okay. So next is, which are the advantages and the disadvantages of virtual machine? Okay. So now, as I told that in definition, I told that all the hardware of a computer is going to be into several different environments. Means we are combining, means all the three different execution environments are going to share the single memory or single drives or single CPU, you can say. So what is the advantage here? It is going to provide the complete protection of system resources, because each virtual machine is going to isolate the it is going to isolate from all other virtual machines. Okay. So now, so whenever you are using the virtual machines, so system development is going to be system development is done on the virtual machine. So instead of on physical machine, means, so it is going to become very easy. Instead of using the physical machine, you can use here the virtual machine. So it is not going to disturb our normal system operation. So what is the disadvantage of this virtual machine here? You cannot directly share here the resources. You have to take the certain you can say here privileges. There are some certain privileges are there. So it is difficult to implement. It is very difficult to implement because we cannot create the exact duplicate copy of the machine here. Okay, so what do you mean by virtual machine here? So these are the advantages and the disadvantages of operating system. So what is the virtual machine here? Virtual machine means what? We are going to use the hardware of a single computer. So after using this, by using this all the hardware components, we are going to use here the different execution environments by creating the illusion that each separate execution environment is running its own private computer. Okay, so how we are going to implement this? By using the user mode and the kernel mode. So this rectangle is nothing but this virtual machine B diagram is one physical machine. So in that, as I told, user mode and kernel modes are there. So after hardware, after the hardware layer, above layer will be the kernel layer. So this kernel is nothing but what now? Virtual machine manager software, you can say. So that actually runs in the kernel mode. So here there are 3 executional environments are there: VM1, VM2, VM3. So each VM virtual machines are having the separate user mode and the kernel mode. Okay, thank you.